Hello, I'm Laura Mason Lockhart and welcome to the Age of Antiquity YouTube channel for videos and tutorials about creating historical garments. If you enjoy this type of comment, be sure to click the subscribe button and the bell notification below so you'll be identified every time I upload a new video. If you're into 18th century costume, you've probably been amazed by all the fantastic, fancy, scalloped pink trim on 18th century gowns. Today's video is all about how to make your own fancy scalloped pink trim the 18th century way with an antique pinking tool. Recently, I made a new English gown from this gorgeous blue, yellow, cream, and dark red striped silk taffeta. I decided to give the antique pinking tool a try. I have two of them that I got on eBay many years ago, but you can still find them if you're patient. I chose the scallop tool for this project. I barely had enough fabric to make this gown, and I really wanted to use the blue stripe for the trim. I cut the blue stripe out from the leftover fabric and then cut the strips in half again to make them about 2 inches wide. I also found it's easier to cut several layers of fabric at one time. I ended up doing 4-layer sections. Before I started, I pinned the strips together in the center to prevent them from shifting when being cut. The choice of surface is important as the pinker can damage whatever is under the fabric that's being cut. After reading some articles on the internet, I decided to use an old phone book. This gives the pinker something to dig into, and it's soft and it won't dull the cutting edge of the pinker. It's also important to have a very sturdy work table. So let's head to the basement and get started. The first thing I had to do with the tool was sharpen it. It was too dull to cut anything. To sharpen it, I used a small round metal file and place the file into the scallop and move it upwards. Gradually, this will sharpen into a nice sharp edge that will cut. I had to do this a whole lot in order to get this pinking tool to work. The strips are pinked one scallop at a time. It helps to place the top of the scallop about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge to get a nice clean cut. Strike the pinker with a rubber mallet to make the cut. I find it helps to strike the pinker from several different angles. Once the fabric is cut, move to the next scallop and repeat. Once your fabric strips are cut, it's time to gather or pleat the trim. The most common type of pleat used for this trim is a basic box pleat with lots of space left between the pleats. However, I think a slight gather is more impressive with the pinked scallops. To do this, you don't want to gather it tightly. Gathering it by a factor of 1/4 to 1/2 at most is all you need. To figure out the trim required, measure the areas of the garment you plan to trim and multiply by 1.5. I'm going to show you 2 ways to gather this trim. The first way is the period correct way, and it is called whipped gathering. To do this, take a piece of thread about the same length as your trim and tie a knot in one end. Take the trim, fold under one scallop, and then bury the knot up inside that scallop. Fold the trim in half and finger press along its length. Take the needle and going from back to front, skip ahead about 1/8 of an inch and take a stitch from front to back. Move ahead another 1/8 of an inch and take another stitch. Depending on how thick your fabric is, the stitch you might need would be anywhere between 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. You can experiment on a piece of scrap fabric to determine your ideal stitch length. This type of trim works best if the trim is pulled to gather a little bit as you go. It does not work very well to gather the entire length of the strip and then try to pull it up. As you can see, the thread, when doing this type of stitch, makes a nice little spiral along the back of this fold. Now I'm going to go a little bit further, and then I'm going to gather this up and show you what it'll look like. So once you have enough, about 1 inch or 2 inches, Then you pull on this thread and gather the fabric strip up a little bit. It's not going to want to gather a whole lot on that fold, but that's fine. And again, you don't want it too tight. You can open it out to get a good idea what it's going to look like. Okay, I have now gathered the entire length of this strip of fabric and I'm ready to finish off. And we're going to finish it off the same way we started. You're going to fold this end in half and fold it again. And then I'm going to take these last few stitches right through that doubled up fabric so that you have a nice finished edge on both sides of the gathering. So I'm going to gather up the last bit here. There it goes. And we're all set to apply this strip to the garment. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine for the cheater method of gathering these strips. So just like we did with the quick gathering, I'm going to fold that under to make a nice finished edge, and then fold the strip in half all along its length. And then I'm going to put it under the needle of the sewing machine and put the needle down a little bit in from the end, very close to the fold. You want to be as close as possible. You're going to set the sewing machine to gathering stitch, whichever that is on your machine. I'm sewing about a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. It's not a huge problem. If you do sew a little further away, if you leave too much space in there, it'll start decreasing the width of your strip. So as we come to the end, I'm going to fold under the raw edge towards the wrong side, so that we'll have a nice finished edge on both ends of this strip. And as you come to the end, I'm just going to put the foot up and pull this away. Okay, here we are, ready to apply the trim to the actual garment. So this is the front of the dress, and I've already started applying trim starting at the center back. So I'm going to take this piece that we've gathered up, fold the end under, and take the thread and bury the knot up inside of that fold, like so. And sew the two together right in the center. And finger pressing as I go, I'm adjusting this trim so that the bottom of the scallops is about even with the edge of the dress. And again, if I feel I need to adjust these gathers at all, I can get a pin. And then as you notice, with this type of trim, there's a little bump or a little ridge along the underside where the gathering was done. And I found it lays better if you take a stitch that goes over top of that little ridge. So I come up just to the one side of it, and then go down just on the other side of it. It doesn't need to be sewn on really tight. I tend to tack this on about every ½ inch, or between 1/4 and ½ inch, the whole way down. Sometimes if you turn a corner, you need it to be a little bit tighter. But for the most part, you want it to be loosely tacked on here. In many cases, then they could take it off and change the trim if they wanted to, or if they needed to clean the dress. So I'm going to continue stitching like this all along the length. I'll turn it over so that you can see how it looks on the other wrong side. You can see they're fairly long tacking stitches, and they're just holding that trim right on the gown. Okay, so here we are, having made it down this part of the dress, and I thought it would be helpful to show you how to turn a corner. If you're going to put trim down the front, you don't have to. I have finger pressed this out and sewn it down to about the distance from the edge. About half the width of the trim is sewn to there. Then you open it out and adjust it so that it's covering up everything you want it to cover up, and it's at the right place going down the front. And again, I'm lining up the very bottoms of these scallops with the edge of the garment. So I'm just going to scoot things around until it's covering everything up that I want it to cover up, like that fastener. And then I'm ready to put a few stitches in to hold this down nice and tight. Now, if this isn't laying real well, especially on places like sleeves, or you're afraid it'll start to roll over, you can take some tacks about halfway out to the end just to hold it down and make the stitch as small as possible so you don't notice it. That's also helpful in little places like this. I'm going to tack it again over here. And then I'm ready to continue stitching down, tacking in the center. Hey, and here we are, the trim all sewn on. And as you can see, it's still a little bit not lying flat. So I'm going to show you how to press it to make it behave a little better. You don't want to press the iron down onto this and make it completely flat, as that'll kind of ruin its nice fluffy look. But what you can do is hover the iron a couple inches above the trim and steam. Then press with your fingers and it'll lay down very nice.